Hey, what's up? Zach here. And recently I was lucky enough to buy at auction a pair of Kyrie's player-exclusive Kyrie 3s that he wore during the 2017 season, and most notably during practice for Game 5 of the NBA Championships in 2017. And this custom player-exclusive was actually part of a set of 2 shoes. One of them was worn for multiple games. He actually had some marker writing on here, some customization, which were quite a bit more expensive. Obviously, I didn't feel like going broke over a pair of shoes. This one was used more for kind of shooting around practice. And like I said, most notably practice during Game 5 of the 2017 NBA Finals. Both the same shoe, just that the one had his own artwork on there, made it quite a bit more expensive at auction. And these ones here, which didn't, which drove the price down a little bit, allowing me to get them. And since Kyrie famously had that turf toe injury back when he was at Duke, there has been a lot of speculation for a long time if Nike has been putting anything in the midsole of the Kyrie line shoes to protect that toe. So I'm pretty excited to cut these things open and to see if there really is a lot different between Kyrie's player exclusives and the one you can buy at the store. Oh yeah, and they glow in the dark. Let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, this is an area where there isn't much different between the PEs and the stock. However, the things that are different are kind of a big deal. That starts with number 1 in the heel counter. Now, I noticed when I was doing the teardown, the heel counter on the Kyries was almost impossible to get through. It was super stiff, thick, just my knife did not want to bite through it. However, on the stock version of the shoe, my knife just went right through it like butter, and you can even tell kind of when you're moving side to side. The stock version of it just kind of moves back and forth, pretty floppy, really nothing doing there, whereas on the Kyries, it is pretty stiff. You actually have to put some force into it to actually get it to move, and that just shows me, number 1 off the bat, the uppers are made for a little bit more containment, a little more violent containment on Kyrie's, whereas the stock model is meant for a little bit more comfort. And moving into the midfoot of the Kyrie 3s on the stock model, the reason I got this colorway is because it had some of the same colors here on the outsole tread that I could test head to head. But on this version of the shoe, it just has these urethane nubs here, whereas on Kyrie's PEs, there's none of that. It's just more a little plastic kind of translucent reinforcement there. Now that is just a colorway difference, and he has worn versions of the shoe with these nubs. But once you get into the forefoot of the shoes, that's where another subtle but significant difference is, and that is in the toe cap guard. Whereas on Kyrie's PEs, it is actually pretty stiff and a little bit thicker. If you look at the upper durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, on this toe drag guard, I mean, barely a scuff on it. It does kind of get through the gray layer, that painted layer, but other than that, really no damage. Whereas on the stock model of the shoe, that toe cap guard is much thinner, more flexible, more malleable. The Dremel just bites right through it. So as you can see, even though the colorways may change on the Kyrie 3 stock, that material is the same across all of them. It's just a much more flexible material, meant for more comfort, whereas on Kyrie's player exclusives, his custom ones, they're meant more to take a beating. They're meant to protect his toes a little bit more, especially from more external blunt trauma, may say from somebody else's foot trampling on you. And getting into the midsole teardown, this is where I'm guessing most people are most interested to see what is hiding underneath of these, and if there's anything protecting Kyrie's foot more than the stock model. And to no one's surprise, yes, there are differences. However, they are much more subtle than you would think they are. Now, both Kyrie's PE and the stock Kyrie 3 both have a visible rear foot loaded zoom air unit. They both also have the same heel height and heel to toe drop, same forefoot stack. The difference comes in the shank of the shoes. Kyrie's is longer and double the thickness of the stock model, which makes sense to me because usually for something like turf toe, you want to shield that joint. If you put something stiff underneath of that joint, sometimes you can actually cause some irritation there just because you need a little bit more forgiveness. What I'm a little bit surprised is that there isn't a little bit more forgiving midsole material, maybe a little bit more foam under the distal end of the shank here. But what that leads me to believe is that he is getting all that maybe from a custom insert, which actually can do that a little bit better because you can really dial that in to your exact foot shape. Whereas on a shoe, yeah, you can get the last to be your custom shape, but they might not be able to get the custom undulations of your foot in there. So my guess is they made it stiff enough to stress shield the forefoot and to offload the forefoot, but then everything else is being taken up by the orthotic. And when you put Kyrie's PE on, you can tell that the shoe is stiffer than the stock model. It almost feels like the shoe is bulkier under your foot, and that's that stiffness. I also found that when I was just kind of doing that single leg jump on the Kyrie PE, it really did launch a little bit easier. I had just a little bit easier of a time getting up off the ground. It just felt like the shoe was doing a little bit more work for me, and that really makes sense because when you're jumping in basketball, especially in the paint, taking a layup, or trying to dunk, or more importantly, pivoting really hard side to side, trying to make more ankle breaker moves. If the shoe can take up a lot more of that stress and a lot more of that strain from your foot, then that is going to take a lot of pain away and is going to take a lot of that mechanism of injury that might be causing more chronic pain under the ball of your foot. And so it's really no surprise, you look at the jump height test on the Kyrie PE, got 37 centimeters on average, which for an older shoe that's already been worn, it's actually a pretty decent jump height, and that just shows you that shank really does harness a lot of potential energy and does give back a lot of kinetic energy, which is interesting. I would have done that test on the Kyrie stock model, and I did. However, these are size 14s. The only reason I got this one was because the color under the forefoot was the same, and I wanted to get a new pair, and this was the closest I could find. So it was interesting, though, that the shank on the Kyrie player exclusives is still longer than the size 14 stock model of the shoe. Just goes to show you how much bigger it is, you know, versus a 1-to-1 on the shoe, which is pretty interesting. And so speaking of different colors of outsole rubber, remember on the Kyrie player exclusives, this is almost an entire bed of translucent rubber, whereas on the stock model of these, I have it here in a dyed rubber. Now, translucent rubber is going to perform differently from dyed rubber no matter what the shoe is, even just two versions of the same stock model shoe. So that's not a 1-to-1. However, what is 1-to-1 is here in these topographical maps here in the forefoot where you do most of your pivoting on the Kyrie 3. Now, the reason I got this color of shoe is because it had the same dyed orange color as well as some of the same blue colors. So when evaluating that rubber, you can get a true 1-to-1 comparison between the PE and the stock. And even before I did the durometer test or the durability test on these, as soon as you put them on court, you can tell exactly the difference between Kyrie's and the stock. Kyrie's shoes are silent. They make no noise on court, and they grip like crazy, especially when you are pivoting on the forefoot, when you're really laying down your big toe joint or the outside of your foot trying to pivot hard on turns. Whereas on the stock model of the shoe, they screech all over the place. They both have pretty decent traction. However, you can tell the different rubber compound on the stock model of the shoe just because of the sound of them on the court. And if you look at the durometer test on these, the measure of hardness, on the Kyrie player exclusives, he's only coming in about 13.5, which is still pretty hard rubber compound. However, if you look here at the topographical map on the stock version, comes in at 16.75, which is a pretty significant jump in durometer. So it goes to show you on the stock model of the shoe, they're trying to make these more durable so that people can wear them longer. Whereas on Kyrie's, they're not meant to be used all that long, so they can make it a softer rubber compound, a little bit more of a tacky compound, and get maximum performance for a short amount of time. Also, that translucent rubber also helps because when you're using translucent rubber, good translucent rubber, on a really good, well-maintained hardwood court, you're going to get the ultimate traction. And if you look at the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, on Kyrie's, you're getting a little bit over a millimeter of damage, whereas on the stock version of the Kyrie 3, really not even a millimeter of damage on that. So what I also think is kind of interesting is that the newer shoes Nike has been making in the 2020s, the Dremel tests have been getting quite a bit worse on the Nike shoes on the stock versions, whereas before, these were actually pretty hard, durable rubber compounds, and the Kyrie, the player exclusives on them, had the softer rubber. So is Nike going more toward performance in their shoes, or are they just slacking on the durability and saving that for the EP or XDR version of the shoe? I guess you can decide. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. And for those of you that watch a lot of my reviews and are interested in stats, 14.87 seconds on the shuttle test on these. I actually didn't love these on an asphalt or concrete court just because they didn't take turns all that well, so I couldn't really get up and go as fast as some other shoes. However, remember, these are meant for hardwood play, so when you're on hardwood and these take turns on a dime, they're going to perform a lot better than something on an outdoor court. And looking at the size, shape, and fit of Kyrie's custom last, the shape they used to make the shoe specifically to his foot, it's actually pretty interesting. These are size 12s. However, my foot was still butting up against the inside of this shoe, and it also just gets a little bit more narrow here in the midfoot, and then it kind of gets a little bit more normal or more true to size up here in the forefoot. So what this tells me is he has parts of his foot that are pretty narrow, some parts a little bit more inflared. And that just kind of goes to show you, his foot isn't just one thing. It isn't just a wide foot or a narrow foot. People's feet can be wide and narrow in different places, and that's why having a player exclusive shoe where shoe that fits your foot like a glove, plus a custom orthotic in there, can really make these shoes feel like an extension of your leg and really improve your performance just by having the confidence to know that that shoe underneath of you is a one-to-one on your foot. And that just goes to show you, even in the world of player exclusive shoes, there is a wide range of customization. There are some players like Serena Williams where her player exclusive shoe, which I just tore open recently, is wildly different. I mean, barely resembles the stock model of the shoe once you start cutting it open. Whereas in Kyrie's case, the changes are a lot more subtle. They're much more on the micro level versus the macro level. You really got to dissect the shoe to see them. And I think that just kind of reflects maybe how much design input the player has prior to production. So in Kyrie's case, on the 3 at least, maybe he was much more involved in the shoe design process prior to manufacturing, whereas in some other shoes, a lot of times maybe the player just signs on the dotted line, yep, here we go, the next version of my shoe, and then it comes out, they test it, and then they think, oh, there's kind of things that I want to tweak in there, and the company might not want to put that in the stock model of the shoe, so they just make them a custom version of the shoe there. So I think that kind of reflects kind of at what stage the player comes in the design process, how closely their shoe mirrors the stock version of the shoe. And so speaking of all those player exclusive shoes, if there is a player exclusive that you would like me to try to find and cut open, make sure you leave me a comment down below and let me know, and I'll try to find it as long as it doesn't break the bank too much. And if you do want to see me cut open Serena Williams player exclusive shoe, which does have just a ton of customization, really interesting things in it, make sure you click into that video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam and double thick shanks. I'll see you in the next video.